Fortunately, because of a previous engagement that has been planned for several months, I cannot be with you tonight. Additionally, the audience may be interested to learn Democratic candidate Dennis Murphy and my campaign agreed upon 2 debates that will be occurring in Allendale on October 26th and in Ludington on November 1st. I look forward to discussing the issues important to West Michigan and hearing from many of you at those debates. I would like to take this opportunity to share some specific projects that I'm working on to protect our shared way of life and to touch base on some national priorities. First, the Great Lakes. Our way of life in West Michigan is very much defined by Lake Michigan. I joined a bipartisan team of Great Lakes members of Congress to introduce the Defending Our Great Lakes Act. This bill requires the Army Corps of Engineers to design and utilize the best available technologies to safeguard the Great Lakes from Asian carp and other invasive species. Additionally, I believe that it is the responsibility of the federal government to ensure that our ports and harbors are properly maintained. For years, legislators in Washington have raided the Harbor Maintenance Trust Fund and used money designated for harbor maintenance on other projects. I helped reprioritize the way Congress spends water transportation dollars when the House passed my bipartisan amendment to restore funding that was siphoned off elsewhere. This means federal harbor channels such as Pentwater, White Lake, Ludington, Muskegon, Holland, and Grand Haven will have a better chance of competing for federal dredging and maintenance dollars. Secondly, I want to talk about the Obama administration's excessive use of regulations and their impact on West Michigan. I find a large part of my work as your representative is fighting to prevent excessive regulations from destroying jobs here in West Michigan. For instance, I'm fighting an OSHA rule that would shut down foundries in West Michigan, a backbone industry for our manufacturers. I work to end bureaucratic infighting that would have cost Muskegon 500 jobs. I stopped a bureaucrat from changing a major definition that would have cost another West Michigan manufacturer 650 jobs. These are real families that would be impacted because of bureaucrats in Washington trying to justify their jobs. Lastly, I want to discuss our national debt. As our national debt approaches $20 trillion, the problem is clear. Washington is addicted to spending, which in actuality is intergenerational theft. I believe that we must stop spending money we don't have as quickly as possible. One of my top legislative priorities is to pass a balanced budget amendment to the Constitution. Unless we balance the books, all Americans will continue to suffer through a weak recovery. Our country is facing serious fiscal challenges, and this administration, with its budget, missed an opportunity to address the automatic spending that is driving our debt. The longer we wait to address the debt crisis, the more difficult it will become to make the changes necessary to get America's fiscal house in order. I introduced the Debt and Taxation Transparency Act to help taxpayers better understand how Washington's reckless spending could impact their pocketbooks and way of life by providing them with a taxpayer financial statement. Thank you again for the opportunity to submit this letter to you. I want everyone to know that I work every day to serve the people of West Michigan and bring West Michigan common sense values to Washington. There are many more important issues to discuss, and I look forward to further debating the issues on October 26th and November 1st. Sincerely, Bill Huizenga.
Thank you very much for representing Representative Huizenga. Right, I'd like to introduce you to our candidates for the 2nd Congressional District. We have Matthew Brady, who's the Green Party, Irwin Haas, who's the Libertarian, and Dennis Murphy, who's a Democrat. Once again, we'll begin with the B, Matthew Brady, and we'll have our opening statement, 2 minutes.
Thank you. As you know, my name is Matthew Brady, and I'm running for Congress here in the 2nd District as the Green Party candidate. And first, I'd like to thank the League of Women Voters, not only for this opportunity, which is very wonderful, but also for making democracy work, because I feel that right now, more than ever, we need people to make democracy work. I feel like we're in the winter of our democracy, so I'm very grateful for the League of Women Voters. Something I want you to know about the Green Party will get more votes and elect more candidates than ever before this year, and that's not just wishful thinking, the writing's on the wall. And so I'm very pleased to be a Green Party candidate. And something else about the Green Party, they have 4 pillars. One of those pillars is democracy. And what the Green Party is doing right now, our candidates do not have corporate funding. We are not beholden to corporations. So we can truly be the people's party. And the platform of the Green Party has actually come into complete alignment with exactly what I want my party's platform to be. So I'm very excited about that. And going back to democracy, it's very appropriate that I'm running for the Green Party for representative, because I am part of a movement to get big money corruption out of politics. And what I'm talking about is there's lots of movements out there that are calling for a constitutional amendment to remove corporate personhood. That means corporations are not people, money is not speech, we need publicly funded elections, and that's what we need to do to level the playing ground so the people's agenda is pushed forward, and so that the donor's agenda is no longer holding down the people's agenda. And I would like to take that movement to Washington, D.C. and represent the people like you. Thank you.
Mr. Haas, your 2-minute opening statement.
Thank you very much for the lead for inviting us. I'm Irwin Haas. I'm mostly a retired physician now. I served as a flight surgeon in the Central Highlands of Vietnam. I have a master's in business administration from Grand Valley, and I taught marketing over there. I've been a city commissioner in Kentwood for the last 3 years, and in part I'm seeking higher office as a congressman to work on correcting the main governmental problems I've seen while in that position. Chris and I have been married for 41 years. We've got 3 very successful children and 4 grandkids so far. That counting right. I'm running for office also to try to right-size our military commitments and costs. Our Army has lost every one of its wars, including my war, during the last 70 years, and it's done nothing to stop terrorist attacks in our country. I would also like to get rid of the corrupt and horribly inefficient Internal Revenue Service. We could replace this by all federal taxes with something called a fair tax. It's a national sales tax, about 23%. It solves a lot of the problems with foreign imports, because the foreign imports all of a sudden are going to be taxed at our rates, not at nobody's rates. And then the third thing is to balance the budget, pay down the national debt by eliminating the usual 4 suspects in departments of government, energy, commerce, education, and HUD. None of these add anything to the economy, but do plenty to add harmful regulations.
Dennis?
Thanks for setting up this forum. I appreciate it. My name is Dennis Murphy. I'm a lifetime resident of West Michigan. I grew up in Muskegon, graduated from Muskegon High School, went to Western Michigan University, got my bachelor's degree in education. I taught off and on for 3 years, got to experience budget cutbacks in the schools where they cut millages, they cut programs. I changed to retail for 10 years, running small businesses, and eventually switched to manufacturing. So if I'm elected, I'll be bringing a wealth of variety of experience to the job. I think, I consider myself, to be frankly, to be an FDR Democrat, progressive and pragmatic. I think there is a role for progressive government. Progressive actions got us the women's vote. It freed the slaves. It gave us the Civil Rights Amendment. It gave us environmental regulation that cleaned up our waters, our lakes and our rivers, and cleaned up our air. So I do believe that there is a role for government to be used by its citizens, because it's our tool, it's our government, to get things done. One of the things that Roosevelt said back in 1933 was that, I'm paraphrasing here, he said that, when he was in the depth of a crisis, and he said, we need to do something. He says, it makes sense to try it. If it doesn't work, discard it and try something else, but for crying out loud, try something. Because people were in despair. We had nearly the same despair in 2009. And there was a strong movement on the part of some political parties to not do anything. And thank goodness we got some activity done, and the economy started to improve. Is it perfect? No. I think we can recognize that there are things that need to be fixed, things that need to be improved, while still recognizing what kind of greatness we have as a nation, as well as the things we have accomplished. So I don't think we need to make America great again. I think we already are.
I would like to just interrupt and check to make sure our sound is all right. Steve, I think that these two may not be on, I'm not sure.
I didn't turn it on, but
Oh,
I got you with this mic pretty much.
we're okay?
Now we're on, right?
Okay, thank you. Do we have any questions from the floor? Okay, please.
For 30 years, the mantra of lower taxes and less regulations has done nothing but to increase the gap of wealth in this country between wealthy individuals and the average working guy. How would you propose to attack that gap in wealth that has resulted from those policies of less regulations and lower taxes, especially on the wealthy?
We'll begin with Dennis.
Yeah, thanks. That goes right to the core of my campaign, actually. And you're absolutely right. Since 1980, when this trickle-down economic theory seemed to take hold in some parts of the political sphere, you're absolutely right. The first thing they say is, oh, the tax code's too complex. But when, in 40 years, have you ever seen them make the tax code less complex? They haven't touched the tax code, but what instead they've done is they've flattened the tax brackets. We had progressive taxation from the end of World War II all the way through to the 1980s, and we had the largest growth in economic development in this country for 40 or 50 years. And as soon as they tamped down that, they flattened the tax brackets, they created more tax loopholes. We now have the widest disparity in income from the top to bottom that we've had since the Gilded Age, before the Depression. CEO pay, for example, because of the way tax laws are written, have blossomed from 200 times their average employee's pay to like 600 times. I think all these things need to be corrected. We can correct it with reinstating progressive taxation, simplifying the tax code, get rid of some of the loopholes. A hedge funder should not be able to call his exorbitant or not exorbitant, maybe he earned it, but he shouldn't be able to take his millions and call them carried interest and pay less percentage of tax income than the waitress down the street's paying on her tips. So, my time's almost up. So,
Mr. Haas?
the issue is, why is this gap increasing? The problem arises because the rich do not pay taxes, corporations don't pay taxes, and they never will. People who create prices incorporate the costs of taxes, of regulations, of all the headaches they got from government in the prices that they charge to their customers. Okay, it's a radical idea, but it happens. This is how this real economy works. And so if Myers Thrifty Acres or our bicycle shop type has an increased cost of taxes or regulations, he doesn't absorb those increased costs. He increases his prices, and everybody who walks through that store pays for those. And so what has happened is people who create prices, who control the money, protect themselves, and everybody else who has to pay those prices becomes progressively poorer because they're paying more and more money for the food that they need, for the rent that they pay, for the interest payments that they have on their credit cards.
Okay, are there any other questions from the audience? Oh, sorry.
he's too quiet.
Matthew Brady.
Waiting patiently.
Thank you.
So there's a lot of things the Green Party would like to do to close the income gap. And first and foremost, they're calling for a $15 an hour minimum wage. Not just that, but indexed for inflation. And that's a stimulus for the people who need it most. Those are working families and the poor. The service, our service industry is not effective enough for people to allow their children to grow comfortably and have the opportunities that we want all Americans to have. So I'm very excited about the fact that not only are we calling for a $15 an hour minimum wage, it would have in it a living wage raise for everyone. And also there is the Green New Deal that Jill Stein is calling for, and that's talking about, instead of using subsidies for no reason, giving them to corporations that are already getting record profits, using subsidies for what we're supposed to do and create a new energy infrastructure, creating 20 million new jobs, good jobs for people, manufacturing jobs, engineers, that sort of thing. And that also goes to a lot of our other problems. But there's a lot of things that we need to work on, and it's definitely rich pay their fair share of taxes, but first we have to end the big money corruption in politics, or we can't do that. I think $15 an hour minimum wage is a good place to start. Thanks.
Okay. Yes.
Could you please discuss what you think the role of Social Security is in the future, if you believe that whether or not the government should be responsible for what would be considered a social safety net, and we keep hearing that Social Security is going broke in 10 years. Could you discuss whether or not you think that's true and what the solution would be, or if you think it should be eliminated?
This would go to Irwin Haas to begin with.
The Social Security as it is now used is incredibly unfair. There is a large population of working men, guys who go out there and they work with their hands, who pay 15.3% of everything that they earn into Social Security, and then they're kind enough to topple over dead when they're 65 or 67. They never collect. And that's really a horrible problem. And the way it is structured, he could never find a way around that except by simply privatizing the entire Social Security system. If, as an example, you were to put all that money that these guys put into their pensions, their Social Security, into a private pension plan, they put 15.3% of all that they earn into that plan, and then topple over when they're 67 and ready to retire, at least the family ends up with the estate, okay? And so they might end up with $250,000, which goes a whole long distance towards lifting people out of poverty.
Thank you. Matthew Brady, do you need the question repeated, or are you okay?
I'm fine. So first and foremost, the Green Party wants to strengthen Social Security. And to do that, we want to eliminate the cap. Right now it's $118,500. So if you're making $30,000 a year, that's over 6% of your income. And if you're making $30 million a year, that's 0.5% of what you earned. So not only should we make it viable, we should strengthen it, because we need to take care of people who've worked their entire lives, and we need to take care of our fellow Americans. And Social Security has proven to be an excellent way to do that. And the fact that the last two administrations of our presidential administrations, they've floated the idea of removing Social Security. That really makes me think about what's going on in this country, and about the fact that there seems to be this silent movement where the people don't want us to get rid of Social Security, or it would have happened by now. So I think we really should take Social Security, make it viable, and make it stronger, among other things, because it's an important part of our society, and elderly people need their resources. They deserve to have a comfortable retirement. Thank you.
Okay. Dennis.
I am absolutely 100% against privatization of Social Security. It's a common public good, just like public schools, just like our public roads. There are ways to make it viable. Yes, it does have some actuarial challenges because of the nature and demographics of our population. One thing we can do is make sure we get all the immigrants in the country documented and ensure that they're paying into the system. That would be one way. I am opposed to raising the cap. I don't see anything more than a stopgap right now. If you go from 118 to 128,000, doesn't do anything more for the people that are still making 5 million, 12 million. One of the ideas I had, and I don't have the specific numbers, I think we'd have to run this by the Congressional Budget Office, would be to, rather than raise the cap, let's do a leapfrog over and do a small, it could be 0.1% on, let's say, a millionaire's income, to help fund it from the very top. It's money that they probably won't miss. They're still got all their investments. But if you just raise the cap, all we're going to do is we're going to continue to see, if we continue to have the same demographic challenges, is that in 4 years they're going to want to go to 130,000, then they want to go to 200,000. Meanwhile, people who are making $1 million or more, they've got all their investments going in. But if we privatize it, we risk having people lose all their retirement in a crash and not having it recover for another 10 or 15 years. My 401k hasn't recovered fully from the 2008 crisis right now.
Right, we have a gentleman here.
What would you do as a congressman to address the crisis of climate change?
The first one will be Matthew Brady.
Climate change is one of the top priorities of the Green Party. As I mentioned earlier, the Green New Deal. And the Green New Deal, part of what it is, we want clean, renewable energy by 2030. That's the goal. That's on the platform of the Green Party, and it starts with the Green New Deal. By creating a new energy infrastructure and by creating a lot of better jobs for us all. And that's what we really need to do, because what's happening with the environment now is really scary. We hear all of the time new statistics that are very disturbing. And the Great Barrier Reef pretty much died this year. There's starfish dying. There's the global ecology is suffering in ways that are very scary. We need to take that seriously. And to say, the only other party that has put anything on their platform about climate change says 2050. And frankly, I think that that's just saying that we need to put it off for another 20 years. But, I'm really concerned about today's children. I want to make sure that they have a chance to overcome climate change, and I want them to have a decent future. And I think we need to start that hard work right away.
Okay, we'll hear from Dennis Murphy next.
I think there's some concrete things we can do to address the issue. One would be to assess polluting factories and whatnot, and make sure that they have all the right proper filters and scrubbers. We need to improve wind and solar energy technology. The founding fathers understood what tariffs were for. And when they set up tariffs when they first founded the country, they did it to protect native industries from poaching by the British. British were a behemoth in manufacturing at the time. So the American government set up tariffs to help protect our nascent industries until they could stand on their own. I think we need to do the same thing with wind and solar, set up tariffs and protections for wind and solar energy to get them off the ground so they're not subject to offshore dumping by China and other third world countries who are manufacturing them much cheaper at a polluting level in China. That would help spur the wind and solar renewable energies. So then we can also mandate federal government agencies start getting more and more of their energy from those renewables and help pull that along until those two industries can stand alone.
Mr. Haas.
Yeah, one of our boys, the one with the $1 million mortgage, works at Goddard or someplace national, whatever it is, NOAA. He's an engineer. I think he's the third down in the pecking order running a $8.9 billion project. Tells me that there's been 2 satellites going around and around in polar orbit for the last, since 1979. They go around and they measure the temperature of the Earth. Turns out the temperature really did go up until around 1997, and then it stopped. And it's been completely flat for the last 18, 19 years.
Excuse me. Please go ahead, Mr. Haas.
Anyway, so there's an awful lot of fluff out there. It makes people angry and hostile, twisted on the inside. So I'm not keen, I'm not part of that. I'm not dressed for that church, okay? This is a religion, it's a feeling that we have to worry about carbon dioxide. It's a cure, it's a manure, it helps plants grow. It's wonderful.
Do we have another question from the floor? Okay. Then I will ask one. What are your specific plans to turn the economy around, reduce spending, and create more jobs? We'll begin with Dennis Murphy.
I think some of the things I mentioned, as far as wind and solar, as far as technological advancements, we can use government action to help spur those industries, which would supply good-paying jobs. I do think that I don't buy the big government, small government dichotomy, too much regulation, too little. I think what we need is right-sized government and right-sized regulations. And I have no problem saying if the regulation is overburdensome, we should look at it. But one person's overburdensome could be another person's clean water and clean air. So those are the kind of things we need to watch for when we're looking at this debate and not resort to simplistic statements. So I do think that there's a role for government to help spur those nascent industries. We definitely have an infrastructure problem in this country. Roads, highways, bridges, even the internet and our energy transmission systems all need upgrading. Some of the privatization of the energy delivery system has caused our power lines and infrastructure in that way to decline. And because some of those industries aren't getting the kind of money they used to get from the customer base because it's been siphoned off to other states. And people think they're getting their energy cheaper because it's coming from Texas, but what's really happening is that they're just using the line and nobody's maintaining it. So yeah, we've got infrastructure spending, wind and solar, and let's look at regulations rationally.
Now we'll listen to Mr. Haas. Would you like me to repeat the question?
No, that's fine. The government can't do very much to improve the economy. All they do is they kind of screw it up, they overregulate it, they misdirect it. Just remember the Great Leap Forward in China, 1950s. Millions of people died, starved to death. That's basically what the various economic development corporations do. They don't, they're perfectly worthless. I see this in Kentwood, where it's basically trying to hand out tax relief to somebody, because it may be the marginal difference between settling in Kentwood versus settling in Wyoming, or, and I don't think these guys are likely to go to Mexico or someplace, but they'll play these little games for $5,000 a year, $10,000 a year. We'll settle in Kentwood. We're not going to settle in Grand Rapids or someplace. And it really has, so the government really has no role to play in developing the economy. They stay out of it.
Okay, Mr. Brady.
Yes, so I think the first thing we have to do is we have to make sure the TPP doesn't go through, because we don't need any more of our good-paying jobs going across seas where we have to compete with people who are making incredibly low wages. And there's also things we need to think about as far as like prison labor right now. Now we're having our prisoners at slave wages making products for corporations. And I mean, how did that happen? I mean, when I was a boy, they just made license plates, and that made sense because they were for the state. Now they're making products for Walmart, and it's really disturbing. And as I mentioned before, there's the Green New Deal, and I think that solves a lot of problems. But first and foremost, I oppose the TPP. I think we need to repeal NAFTA. I think we really need to focus on ending this entanglement with the world economy and focusing on, creating a robust economy that's self-sustaining. I mean, I have no problem with trade, but at the same time, we need to focus on Americans first. And so yeah, and then of course what I said before about, a $15 an hour minimum wage, that's a long-term solution for our economy.
Okay, I have a quick yes or no question for you. Should the President's Supreme Court nominee been voted on when presented or delayed until the next president? So we'll begin with Irwin Haas.
I think it should have been brought up for interviews and whatever they thought, they should have rejected him or not. This delaying by a year, I think, is completely uncalled for.
Okay, Mr. Brady?
Yes, I think our government should do their job. I think they should vote on who the president ask them to vote on.
Mr. Murphy?
Absolutely, it should have been an up and down vote within 30 days.
Okay, thank you. Do you have a question from the floor? No. Okay. Voter access in the democratic process is a hallmark position of the league, and how do you propose expanding voter access? Well, actually, we asked that the last time, but the other candidates, but I guess we'll listen to your responses. So the first one up would be Mr. Haas.
Strictly speaking, voter access and all that is a state issue. It should not be a federal problem. In the state of Washington, I think in Oregon, all voting is by mail. You register, you get the little piece of paper, you fill it out, you send it back. It's very efficient, and it seems to work extremely well. And you know, if I had to suggest such and such to the state of Michigan, I think I'd try to introduce that. I don't know that this is a federal issue at all. I mean, we can give all the blather in the world about that, but it really is not it's not a federal problem.
Okay, Mr. Brady?
I think that it's paramount that we have as many people vote as possible. You know, we make it as easy as possible. You know, right now, if you don't have an address, you don't vote. People who don't have an address, they need to have a say in their government because they've got the biggest problems of us all. And but you know, as far as some physical legislation, I support the Voter Empowerment Act. It would make registration easier and protect our voter rights. You know, we need to do everything we can. We need to make sure that absentee voters, you know, I think technically in this state, you know, you have to actually be absent to absentee vote, right? So, I mean, like, why? Why not? I mean, and people, you know, they're not actually out of town. They just don't feel like going and voting that day. And, you know, there's nothing wrong with that. We should all be able to vote. It should be easy. It should be easy to register because the people need to represent.
Okay, and Mr. Murphy?
Thank you. Actually, I think it is a federal issue. The states, many states have been in the forefront of voter suppression for the last 40 or 50 years, well, more than that since Jim Crow. So I think it's the federal government's job to ensure that citizens have their constitutional right to cast a ballot. Not only that, I think we need a national holiday, and we need federal standards for elections on which federal seats are held. The states have been doing too much for the last 40, 50 years to suppress the vote, and every time we make advances, it gets turned around. So I think it's time to look at it from a new direction and not say it's just a state issue. It's a constitutional right issue, and it needs to be protected, nurtured, and encouraged.
Okay. Let's see. Do we have a question from the floor? Okay.
What do you think is this country's greatest problem, and how would you go about fixing it?
The first person to go will be Mr. Brady.
I addressed that in my opening statement. I think it's big money corruption in our government. And so we need to end corporate personhood. We need to have a constitutional amendment that specifically says corporations are not people, money is not speech, and we also need publicly funded elections so we can level the playing field for the people. That's our biggest problem because right now, you know, what goes through, what legislation goes through at the top? It's the stuff that helps the donor class because Congress is listening to the donor class. And we need to eliminate that. And I know it sounds difficult. I know it sounds like a pipe dream, but there are plenty of movements out there that are working very hard towards that. There's wolf-pac.com. You know, I actually signed the Equal Voice for All agreement, and to give credit where credit is due, so did Dennis, and that specifically said that we need to overturn Citizens United with a constitutional amendment and have publicly funded elections. And so, yeah, I mean, that's the root of all of our problems. And that's where we need to start. Because, yeah, I talk about the Green New Deal, but what we need to do first is we need to restore our democracy. We need to allow our democracy to function properly, because that is our biggest problem.
All right, Mr. Murphy.
I'm actually going to have to echo Matthew. This has been one of my key issues since we decided to run, and it's been on my website from day one. Absolutely publicly funded federal elections, get the money out of the system, and put everybody running for office on a level playing field so they're not bought and paid for by special interests. Once you get that fixed, then now the elected officials are responsive to the voters.
Okay, and Mr. Haas.
The big problem in this country is that the Congress and a lot of the national security agencies, etc., are ginning us up for a war with Russia. It's nuclear war. These guys are crazy. I mean, you read it. Our daughter works at Rand Corporation. They are circulating a bid for how will we win asymmetric warfare in the Baltics. You know, nuclear war heads dropping around Poland and Lithuania, etc. They are serious. These guys are nuts. And then the other issue is, of course, jobs in this country have been bleeding out like crazy. And the solution to that is by changing our tax system from all the stuff that is pretty corrupting and corrupted, the IRS, all these other makeshift kinds of taxes, and change it to a national sales tax. That way, when somebody makes something in Mexico and they import it to the United States, it is taxed at 23% automatically. And that levels the playing field real rapidly. I think Trump referred to that during his last debate here, and everybody kind of blew that off. But the guy really has, some business sense. Thank you.
Okay, I'd like to ask a question on immigration. The world is in the throes of an immigration crisis. As a legislator in the wealthiest and most fortunate country in the world, how would you propose to help? And we'll start with Mr. Murphy.
Are you speaking of the Syrian, well, you're just talking about immigration in general. Well, as I said before, I think we do need immigration reform. Unfortunately, the last bills that were in Congress were scuttled by both political parties, pushing the limits on what they wanted to accomplish with the bill. As a pragmatist, I'd say, what's the first thing we need to do? And that's to get these people documented. They're here, they're working. We can't deport 11 million people. It's not going to happen. We don't have the resources, the infrastructure. So, and many of them are working here legally. They're good residents. So my proposal would be to introduce a law that would get all illegal immigrants documented within a 6-month window, for example. And again, these timeframes can be negotiated. That's what happens in politics. But set up a window, have them all come out of the shadows, get documented, and then say, okay, you've got a green card now. You can stay here for 5 years. That gives our INS time to investigate their background, make sure everything's straight. But for people who don't get in here for the 6-month window, that's the stick. If you don't get in here within that window that's been negotiated to come out of the shadows, then if you're caught, we will deport you. So we give people an opportunity to step forward. Now they're here, they're documented. Then let's take it to the next step. Let's discuss whether or not there's a path to citizenship. I know the Republicans don't want a path to citizenship. A lot of the Democrats did. My view is just let's get them documented first. Let's talk about the citizenship part afterwards. Don't try to roll it all into one bill and kill the bill. Now we've gotten nowhere.
Thank you. Mr. Haas.
Yeah, my parents were legal immigrants, so I've got a little fish to fry here. They actually fled socialism. Illegal immigrants really don't have any standing. They can't go to court. They really don't have any access to, their rights, and so they're constantly abused and so on and so forth. Most of the illegal immigrants did not come here for citizenship. They came here to work, to make money, and the presumption is that they would go back to wherever they came from and start a little shop or own a little business or something. But once they cross the border, it's such a miserable experience that they don't want to go back and repeat that. And so they're stuck here. I kind of agree with the notion of a green card, but I don't think that they should be offered in any way any citizenship. I think that as soon as that 5 years or you're out of here, unless you can prove some reason why you have to have an extension of your green card.
Mr. Brady.
Well, first, I'd like to say I think all people have inalienable rights, not just Americans. I think that that's an American philosophy that we need to take into consideration when we're dealing with people from other countries, especially refugees. I mean, it's a good idea for us to make sure that, that the people who are coming into this country, there's no problem with them, that they are actually people who are suffering and they need a safe haven. And it's a good thing for us to take those people in. I believe that very strongly. And I think that we need a path to citizenship. I think that we also need to consider that, a lot of these people, when you think about a mother of 2 children who has been in this country since maybe she was 6, her parents brought her over in this country. She had no say in it. She's worked here for 20 years. You talk about deporting, that woman, separating her from her family. We shouldn't do that unless it's absolutely necessary. Of course, deportation is necessary under very specific circumstances. But, we need to give people a chance. We need to care about, the ethical nature of what we're doing to anyone in this country.
Okay, thank you. Yes?
Statistically, the United States is about 4.5% of the world population. Despite that, we have 22% of the world's prison population within our shores. What will you, as our representative, do to address that national black eye?
All right, we'll begin with Mr. Haas.
Well, first of all, get rid of most of the laws having to do with drugs, now they're trying to criminalize speech, the political correctness on the universities and so on. They're trying to put people in jail for saying something. And I think that will go a long way towards clearing out the criminal elements in larger cities. The war on drugs is basically like Amway. The dealer is the main customer. Got it? And so the pusher is also the big user, and in order to pay for his habit, he has to go out there and recruit people. And so he goes to the schoolyard and to any place he can find somebody that he can get in as a runner or whatever. And so this whole business kind of perpetuates itself. So getting rid of the war on drugs probably cut the prison population by 50%. And getting rid of a lot of the really dumb laws that we've got are really critical.
Mr. Brady.
I definitely think that we should focus on rehabilitation for our prisoners. The conditions that they're suffering under, there's a hole, and I've seen this personally, that people get stuck in when they get stuck in the system. And it's hard to dig yourself out of that hole. And if you're going to a prison, they're saying, oh, you did something unethical, so we're going to send you to this place that's horribly unethical, that's going to make you have to work that much harder to be a good person. I mean, it doesn't make any sense. And yes, the Green Party does call for to end the prohibition on hemp and marijuana. And of course, there's a reason why certain laws were established that don't honestly seem to have any effect besides putting more people in prison. And like I mentioned before, we have prisoners working at slave wages, creating products for our corporations. Our working class people are competing with these people going to prison. So we really need to look at the incentives, and we really need to think about what we're doing to our own people, even if they are our prisoners.
Okay, and Mr. Murphy.
I think we do need to revisit the war on drugs and review what kind of laws we're actually incarcerating people for. there's also huge disparities in the way people are prosecuted. Unfortunately, some of that's at the state level, so some of the states are going to have to revisit how they let their prosecutors prosecute people. They, go in and charge somebody, with a level 10 crime because they figure they can negotiate it down to a level 3 and throw them in jail for 6 months, and now the prosecutor can walk away saying he's just got a conviction. We have to end privatized prisons. That's just an incentive. I mean, Eisenhower talked about the military-industrial complex. In this country right now, we have a criminal justice incarceration complex. Well, the whole thing is designed to cycle people through. As soon as they make a mistake, they're thrown right back in jail. And not only that, in many jails, the prisoners are being forced to pay for their housing. I think as a society, if we throw somebody in jail, we need to pay the price. It comes out of our taxes, because if it's not transparent what we're paying, then there's no incentive to change the system. Cost is a good driver to change. And what happens is that if the prisoners are paying their own room and board, it's not coming out of anybody's pocket, so we don't have any incentive to change the fact that we're throwing somebody in jail for missing a child support payment or something. So those are some of the things we need to address. But just so you know, the last statistic I saw is that the prison population really climbed at the state level. The federal government was really a follower.
Is there another question from the floor? Okay, I have one very quick one. Would you sign a pledge to not raise taxes? Why or why not? And so we will begin this one. I think I might have lost track, but I think we're at Matthew.
I certainly would raise taxes or to raise taxes on the top 1%, especially because I think that that's a big problem. The wealth disparity is one of the biggest problems right now, and there's a lot of different ways that have been proposed to have the richest of us pay their fair share of taxes. Why haven't they paid? Why is it so difficult for any of these proposals to go through? It's because of the corruption in our government. But no, back to the question though. It's very necessary for all of us to ensure that there is fair taxes, especially at the top.
Okay. Mr. Murphy?
No, I couldn't sign something like that, not after I've advocated for returning to progressive tax laws. We need the right tax laws and the right taxes. Some may go up, some may go down. We need to make sure that the people at the bottom aren't paying exorbitant amounts of taxes. They don't have the disposable income, and what that does is keep them on a treadmill of not ability to save money. So,
Mr. Haas?
Yeah, I have refused to sign one of those. I've been offered the road many times. I just don't bother. I just don't think it's worth committing myself to something like that. I'm not going to raise taxes. I've been a commissioner out there in Kentwood for 3 years now, and there have been 0 increases in taxes. I try to put the stop to any the regulations that they want to increase and all the dumb stuff that they want to do. And I'm going to run on that for re-election and make them really sad. Because some of these guys are on record as saying, we want to raise taxes, we got to raise taxes for this, and hey, I'll stop it.
Okay, we have last call from the floor. Hearing none. We'll wrap up then with our 2-minute wrap-up, and we started with Mr. Murphy, so I think this time we'll start with Mr. Haas.
Yeah, I'm kind of an anarchist. You may have gathered that I'm kind of a little bit different. On the other hand, I do get published in national magazines and make a lot of people very upset. And once in a while, my ideas do come through on the national stage. Pretty active on the Economist, which is one of those national magazines, international magazines, and they react to me. So my ideas are, you may think that they're a little different, but they got a bite when people really know what I'm talking about. I'm concerned about the size of the military. I think that this is a route that people are using. Well, we've got this army, we've got to use it. And that leads people into all sorts of very self-defeating headaches, problems. They are literally ginning up a war with Russia. The second thing is the tax code is totally crazy. It's arbitrary. We really are screwing the little guy with Social Security taxes, with income taxes, with corporation taxes. Totally arbitrary. I mean, somebody gets to a legislator, they suddenly find themselves untaxed. And that the fair tax really does do an awful lot of internal economic change to try to correct that. I'd like very much to have your vote and support in the next election. I'm not likely to win, but I'm going to keep on speaking. And I do get out to national audiences. Thank you.
Thank you. Mr. Brady, your 2-minute closing statement.
Yes, I'd like to start out by reading a quote from the Green Party's vice presidential candidate, John Mubaraka, in regards to his campaign with our presidential candidate, Dr. Jill Stein. John says, "This campaign is about building a movement. It's about building an alternative to the status quo." And I think that we've seen this year that a lot of people want an alternative to the status quo. But I think more importantly, what he said about building a movement is something that should really resonate with people. Because, you know, what I've realized this year is that, what the independent senator from Vermont said, Bernie Sanders, before he endorsed the Democratic presidential candidate, right before that he said, the goal isn't to win elections, the goal is to transform America. So building a movement, transforming America, you know, those are the things that I really hope stick with people this year. That's what's really sticking with me. And because, you know, it sounds distasteful to say the goal isn't to win elections. Of course, we want to win elections. We have a lot more ability to make change if we are elected officials. But at the same time, this is a democracy. All of us have the ability to make a change. Unfortunately, the people who participated in this democracy tonight, none of us may get elected. But that doesn't mean we can't stop pushing the people's agenda. In fact, it means we need to push even harder as citizens. And so I hope that we all think about that. We all look at different ways that we can support the people's agenda and reestablish our democracy.
Mr. Murphy.
Thank you for hosting the event again. So I got into this because I felt like our district was being neglected to an extent. We've talked to people in Muskegon Heights. They don't feel like they ever know what's happening from their representation in Washington. We had a good town hall there a couple weeks ago. So one of the things I want to do is be able to be accessible and outreach and make sure that, like somebody said in the previous session with the state reps, you know, don't just have a town hall when you come into town at 10 o'clock in the morning at a restaurant in Granville. People are working. I work all day. I couldn't go to one of those. So I think there's a time and place to be able to be accessible to your constituents. I want to be somebody will send you a genuine, legitimate response. If you go to my website, you send me a question now, you'll get the response from me. You'll get a phone call, you'll get an email from me. It won't be a canned letter, it won't be a canned phone call. One of the other things I think that we've had in Washington for too long is obstruction. The partisan gridlock is just frustrating for me to watch as a citizen. And actually, I didn't even register as a Democrat until January. I mostly lean Democrat, but I've voted for Republicans in the past. So if I got elected, I have no problems working with a Republican, with a Green Party representative or Libertarian. If they come to the table with a good idea and I like it, I'll sign on to it. But too often you look at votes in Congress and they just right down party line. I mean, what happened, you know, to the bipartisanship that we used to see generations ago? I think the problem is that one party's too afraid of partisan from somebody running against them in the primary, and then when they get into office, there's no reason to listen to the other side because there's not enough votes to kick them out anyway. So, I think it goes back to eliminating those gerrymandered lines and making our districts competitive. But until then, we need to work across party lines to get activity done and can't shut it down just because somebody's on the other side of the aisle.
Thank you. I want to thank our candidates for their time and for their attention to this, and I also want to give a special thanks to the audience for the fact that you cared and came out tonight and joined us. So give yourself a applause. I have a couple of really quick housekeeping things, and first I wanted to let you know that we do have a videographer here, so when you go home you can tell your friends and neighbors that it was taped. In a few days it will appear at our website, and that's lwvholland.org, and so you'll find that there. And I also want to mention that our voter guides will be in the community soon, in the next few days, and they'll probably be at the local library. But we'd love to see you transition off those printed guides. They're not very green. And we do have a wonderful website, and it's called vote411.org. It's easy to remember. I think, do we have? They're all on the TV. Okay, great. So we've got some bookmarks out there that you can pick up that's got the website on it. Have your neighbors go there. There's a number of helpful things you can find on that website. You can find out if you're registered, where you're registered, where your polling place is, what your ballot will look like, because we all are voting on different things. And it will also give you the candidates' positions on, we asked like 4 questions, and many of the candidates have submitted their answers to the questions, and so you can get more information on them. Plus, these gentlemen do have links to their websites, so you can find out more about that. So it's a great resource. And another note that I want to make too is that when you do go vote, if you vote absentee on the envelope, it gives you very specific instructions that there's 3 paths to a successful ballot, but you frequently don't get that information when you're in the polling place. So I just wanted to outline this so that you all understood that the 3 ways: there's a straight ticket option, there's a split ticket option, and there's a mixed ticket option. The straight ticket option is when you vote for your party, and then you would go down to the partisan section. Now, the split ticket, you can vote for straight party, but then you can also pick candidates in the other offices, and so it will register if you picked one straight ticket. It will register that person from that you've chosen from the other party. And then a mixed ticket is when you're just going for all the offices, you're going all over the card. So so that really is about it.